Good morning, you're watching Businessworld Live. I'm Danie Laurel. It's the start of a new trading day. Let's kick off with our banner story. Beginning tomorrow, Metro Manila and nearby provinces will no longer be under the Modified Enhanced Community Quarantine or MECQ. Instead, NCR, Bulacan, Cavite, Laguna, and Rizal will be subjected to restrictions under a so-called GCQ with heightened restrictions that's until May 31st. Now, under this status, only essential travel in and out of this area, collectively called as NCR Plus Bubble, will be allowed. The capacity for indoor dining will be increased to 20% from 10%. On the other hand, alfresco dining capacity shall be up to 50%, and public transport shall also remain operational at capacities laid down by the DOTr. Outdoor tourist attractions in the NCR Plus will also be allowed to operate with a capacity of up to 30%. Now, religious gatherings and funerals for those who died of causes other than COVID-19 will also be allowed at up to 10% of the venue. These announcements come a few days after the PSA reported that the Philippine economy contracted by 4.2% in the first quarter. That Chief Carl Kendrick Chua had earlier said the MECQ and NCR Plus should be eased to help revive economic activity. Santiago City, Zamboanga City, Quirino, and Ifugao will be under MECQ until May 31st. Meanwhile, Finance Chief Sonny Dominguez said the government may have to shell out 75 billion pesos until next year to fund its COVID-19 vaccination program. Dominguez said agencies might have to realign their budgets again to get funds for the program without widening the budget deficit by too much. Okay, guys, how are the markets reacting to these new, let's say, easing of restrictions? You can see on my terminal here, interestingly, quite a sharp decline that's down by 0.1%. We are back na naman at those 6,200 levels. And you can see that on my terminal here. I just want to take a very quick peek, of course, at the airline companies here. This on the back of some new bans going on, especially from the United Arab Emirates and Oman. Anyone with travel history from these two countries within the last 14 days will be prohibited from entering the Philippines during the May 15 to May 31 period. Meanwhile, you've also got the existing travel restrictions. Those are already imposed on passengers from India, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. That is extended until May 31st of 2021. Now, speaking of airlines, you can see Cebu Pacific actually inching up by 0.4% this morning. And this, of course, comes as their parent company, JG Summit, had also given their earnings for the first quarter just yesterday. Recall that yesterday, of course, markets were closed in celebration of Eid al-Fitr, and you've got JG Summit reporting their net income for the first quarter at 122 million pesos. Now, if you take away Cebu Pacific, their income was actually up by 88%. To 5.1 billion pesos. That was driven by URC and petrochemicals cushioning the blow. In fact, their core net income was up by 18% year-on-year in the first quarter to 5.4 billion pesos. Now, another one to be watching out for when we talk about the Gokongwei companies is RLC, which is unfortunately going with the rest of the bourse. That is down by 0.6% this morning. However, they still are very optimistic on the REIT listing. They would like to proceed this year with an IPO for the REIT, and that will be held in the second half of the year, according to them, and that will hold 14 of their 25 office buildings. This is according to their CEO, Frederick Go. They had also mentioned that their office space will be growing 18% this year to 721,000 square meters. And finally, just a very quick check on our financials here, particularly the banks. I'm just going to pull out the one-day chart for you here. You can see financials slumping by 1.16%. This comes as well as Fish Solutions still sees the BSP keeping the record low interest rates, especially to drive economic recovery. They're saying that it will be a while until the BSP starts to unwind the easing policy. Recall that the Bangko Sentral kept the benchmark rate steady for a fourth straight meeting on Wednesday. And you can see here some of the movers. I do want to look at PNB and RCBC. PNB slumping in just one day actually in the first 5 minutes of the trade by 25%, quite a hefty slump here. Of course, yesterday they had reported their net earnings. Their net income was actually up by 34% in the first quarter. And that's according to them due to improvements in service fees and commission. So very interesting here. We'll try to discuss more about the PNB sell-off later on in the day. Government spending did the heavy lifting in the first quarter, but with renewed lockdowns, how will the construction industry fare for the rest of the year? Now, here to chat with us about their plans and also a promising new joint venture, we have with us EEI Corporation's EVP for Construction, Mr. Norman Macapagal. Good morning, sir, and welcome to the broadcast.
Good morning, Danie. Thanks for having me.
Sir, it's been a tough year, so to speak, for the construction industry. But indeed, we are looking for that to start picking up pace, especially with the government dedicating triple amount of funds for their construction activities. But you do have some good news, and I want to kick off with that. Tell us more about this ARCC joint venture. Of course, this will be focused on projects that are offshore and not domestically driven.
Thank you, Danie. Well, to start with, we have a 60 billion backlog, healthy backlog, and 17 billion of that is with our international operations in Saudi Arabia. I'm also very pleased to inform you that we have just recently been awarded a new contract worth 10 billion in our Saudi Arabia operations. So that brings our backlog now, or our order books work on hand, to 70 billion. 27 billion of which is with our venture in Saudi Arabia.
Sir, how does this change the mix that you have between the local projects and the international projects, and how does this change your strategy?
Well, we find this to be very challenging. It will now be 40% international operations and 60% domestic operations. But here in the domestic market, we are a key player in several sectors. We do high-rise buildings. We're the major property developers. And in the industrial sector, we're also engaged in constructing semicons, food-grade chemicals, cement plants, and power plants. And we're also engaged in renewable energy projects such as solar and wind farms. But we are very active on the Build program of the government. We see this as a key driver towards the economic recovery, and we'd like to be a part of this, not only for the business interest, but also to do our share in nation building. We are currently engaged in several infrastructure projects like the subway. We're doing the clearing operations now, and we're eventually going to start digging so that the tunnel boring machine can be put in place. We're also doing the MRT 7, and I hope you have tried our Skyway, which is a smooth and comfortable ride which reduces the transport time tremendously.
Absolutely, sir. Sir, what was 2020 like? Can you just give us an idea of your performance and what you were able to achieve despite all of these lockdowns compared to your targets for completion ahead of the pandemic?
Well, 2020 hit us with something we have never been prepared before. We lost about 50% of our forecasted revenues. And then we had to develop new safety protocols for COVID. So we had to engage specialist doctors and also consulted with members from the construction industry, the Philippine Construction Association, the Philippine Domestic Construction Board, and we took guidance also from the DPWH and from the Department of Health. It was very difficult. We had to put up safety bubbles in our project sites and adopt work from home arrangement from our office-based staff. But we launched a very aggressive and continuous information and educational campaign among our workers to encourage them to strictly observe our safety COVID protocols and to always remind them of the basic way to protect themselves, such as washing hands, wearing a mask, and wearing face shields, and observing social distancing. We also kept, of course, face-to-face meetings to the bare minimum. It was really a struggle at the start, but we were eventually able to learn the ropes, so to speak, and bring down our incidences of infections. We targeted zero COVID. That was our battle cry because we really take care of our people, Danny. And if I may add, despite the lockdown, when the projects were suspended, we continued to pay our employees and workers their food, salaries, and wages. Even our workers who went home back to their provinces were paid in full. And for those who were not able to go back to their home provinces, mostly our workers from the Visayas in Mindanao, we housed them in our job site barracks and provided them with food to keep them safe and healthy and on full pay despite no work.
Good to know, sir.
We
Sir, how is the first quarter? How did it fare compared to last year? Were you able to do a very quick rebound? Of course, we are in the thick of the second quarter with renewed lockdowns here. I'm sure you were hoping for continuing momentum in terms of completion rate. How has this derailed your plans? And what's your reaction to the renewed GCQ easing, but still with some restrictions with regards to construction?
Well, we welcome the initiatives of the government. Last year, our projects were actually stopped. In fact, all projects were stopped. But this year, we were looking for a more brisk operations, although we were again subject to restrictions. It is a more friendly restriction this year compared to last year. Um, what really affected us perhaps are some glitches in the supply chain and also on the curfew because in some cases it impacted working time, but we find ways to go around these restrictions without violating any government mandated requirements.
Sir, at what percent capacity are you operating right now when it comes to your workforce? And also, uh, what percent of completion rate are you now targeting compared to last year?
um, we have practically recalled all our workers. Um, and compared to last year, we expect a higher level of business activity and accomplishment this year. And we are really hoping and to be a part of the Build, Build, Build program of the government. We are a member, a part of the Chenko Group of Companies or GC, where the thrust is to be future ready. So we have accelerated our digitization, Dani, and we have increased our operational efficiencies by acquiring modern tools and equipment. So we're really geared uh, towards the new normal, which will be with us for quite some time. Although we're also very optimistic because of the vaccine rollout, and we also see some movements from the private sector in a renewed interest to proceed with their projects, which were sort of put on the freezer during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic last year.
And sir, before we let you go po, just one very quick update on the timeline of the projects, particularly the MRT 7 and the Metro Manila Subway Phase 1.
Oh, we're looking at 2022 to complete the MRT 7. For the subway, that's going to be in 2023.
Okay, so hopefully that we will be feeling that already and being able to enjoy those projects in a couple of years. Thank you so much, sir. Norman Macapagal, EEI's EVP for Construction.
Thank you, Danie, for having me, and have a nice day and have a good weekend.
Thank you, sir. Checking in on the biggest headlines this morning. Let me just scroll through that. The Transportation Department said it will seek legislation establishing a 30-year transportation sector roadmap. That's in order to minimize the impact of the government's changing priorities. Now, DOTr Chief Artugade says the transportation roadmap will cover 5 presidents and will have a legislated funding source. Tugade said he had been planning to push for the passage of a Transportation Roadmap Act this year, but the pandemic derailed the timeline for such plans. Speaking to the Management Association of the Philippines, Tugade said he will leave the plans to the private sector in case Congress does not act on them. And this is from the Philippine Star. The Philippines is projected to import more rice next year. That's to meet the rising demand for commodity. According to the latest monthly global grain report of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the country is expected to import a total of 2.1 million metric tons of rice in 2022. This is higher than this year's import forecast of 2 million metric tons. The USDA is projecting the Philippines' milled rice production to decline to by about half of its milled rice production output for the current year. In contrast, rice consumption may rise to 14.4 million metric tons. This means that the Philippines will remain as the second largest importer of rice after China in 2022. And that's a first look into the business day. Today is May 14th, 2021. Catch Business World Live for the market closes at 3:15 p.m. today. I'm Danie Laurel. Mask on, wash hands, stay safe. Philippines, we are one news.